Okay, good afternoon and good morning to those of you joining us on the West Coast. Welcome to today's session, Demystifying Omnichannel Retailing, Finding Value in a Multi-Channel Sales Environment. I'm Megan Castillo, Product Marketing Manager here at Dydacomp, and joining me today is one of our Senior Solution Specialists, Joe Fantozzi.
Hello.
So today's webinar is the first in a series of webinars we'll be hosting over the next few weeks in an effort to clarify the term Omnichannel Retailing. So in today's session, we're going to start with the basics, covering the questions, what is omnichannel retailing? Any of you who have gone to, say, the NRF, the National Retail Federation show, or for that matter, if you subscribe to any trade publications or email blasts, the word omnichannel is everywhere. But what is it and why is it important? Then we're going to dive into some tips on how to achieve an omnichannel retailing approach, followed by some tools to measure and evaluate the success of your efforts. So just a few quick things before we get started. All of you are in listen-only mode. However, this is for you. So please feel free. There should be a questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to use it as we go along. And if for some reason we don't get to their questions, Joe or I will personally reach out to you after the presentation. Okay, so one last thing before we get started. I want to cover a brief background of Dydacomp in terms of who we are and how it applies to today's session. So Dydacomp is a leading provider of order and inventory management solutions for small to mid-sized businesses, particularly those selling in a multi-channel sales environment, which is important to our topic today. So we have customers who are selling through various channels. They might have a brick-and-mortar store, have one or more websites, perhaps using a sales channel like Amazon or eBay. And we provide our customers with the tools to manage all of these sales channels in one single solution.
One of the nice things, Megan, about our solution is that it's not necessarily designed for one particular industry. And as you can see from this particular slide, there's a number of different companies that sell all types of things, from teas, potato chips, cigars. We have many clients that sell dietary supplements or nutraceuticals, clothing, food. So we have seen our own customers evolve from, for example, that single storefront, the retail store, to selling on multiple sales channels like you mentioned, that are now trying to achieve an omni-channel approach. I, in particular, have worked with many of these clients to help them understand the value of each of the channels and how they can use these insights to build out the channels that may not be performing as well as others.
Right. So Joe brings a lot of value to the table from a multi-channel perspective, and I'm going to provide the insight on how to bridge the gap across these channels to achieve an omni-channel approach. Personally, I've actually had a retail business in the past prior to working here at Dydacomp, so I have a good understanding of the challenges retailers are facing and how omni-channel comes into play. Okay, so let's jump into it. One of the first things we need to do is to distinguish between the term multi-channel and omni-channel, because there seems to be a lot of confusion about that.
Right, Megan. I get a lot of customers asking me all the time, what's the difference? And is omni-channel just another name for multi-channel? So can you just explain that a little bit to me?
Yeah, so this is a great starting point, because that is where a lot of the confusion lies. Multi-channel is the predecessor of omni-channel. In order to achieve an omni-channel approach, you have to be selling in multiple channels to begin with. And so multi-channel, this refers to, the sales channels or the vehicles, if you will, through which you're actually selling. So again, that goes back to, your storefront, your online website, mobile devices, etc. And typically, these are working independent of one another. However, things are changing. So when omni-channel comes into play, this is more of a marketing term. This refers to the experience the customer has when shopping in one or more of these sales channels and making sure that it's consistent and emphasizes the importance of cross-channel promotion.
So wait a second, Megan. In terms of consistent, are you talking about like the look and feel in terms of style? So for example, if you sell high-end products, you probably have a pretty nice-looking retail store. So when you're designing your website, you may want to use rich colors like gold and really differentiate your brand from the others.
Well, yes, you definitely want to have a consistent look and feel across all of these channels, but it absolutely doesn't stop there. You know, the experience goes way beyond just the looks. Your sales channels are no longer acting independently, but rather together, creating that 360-degree view of your customers' purchases. So, you know, two ways we have listed here on the screen are buying online, picking up in store. You know, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. Personally, I love this option because, you know, I make sure that my product is there when I go to the store, and typically they offer free shipping when they do it. So it's a win-win situation. Regardless, though, you know, so a lot of you have probably come across this and just thought nothing of it, but actually it's applying an omnichannel retail strategy. You know, but we'll get into some more examples in a minute. For now, the real takeaway is that no, you know, omnichannel is not just another name for multi-channel, nor will it ever be. Omnichannel is about the experience the customer has across the multiple channels in which you're selling. Essentially, you can kind of look at it as, you know, omnichannel is the logical evolution of multi-channel retailing. So instead of treating each one of these channels separately, you know, we as retailers are finding ways to work to our advantage by working together. I mean, after all, you know, our whole world is about networking these days. Everyone's on, you know, their Facebook, their Twitter, their YouTube, you name it, they're interacting. So why aren't we as retailers doing this for ourselves? Okay, folks, we're going to stop for one quick second. Before we continue, I want to stop for a second and take a poll to see how many of you are actually selling on multiple channels today. I'm assuming most of you joining us are, but I just figured let's take a quick poll. So in a moment, you should all be seeing a poll pop up on your screen. It's going to be a simple yes or no question. Just note, please, after you hit the submit button, do not exit out. Your screen will stay there, but we'll remove it as soon as we get all the answers. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. All right. So let's go back for a second and focus more on what omnichannel retailing really is. Again, it's not about the channels, it's about the experience and the brand. Omnichannel retailing gives you, as the retailer, a way to provide shoppers with a consistent experience regardless of the sales channel. The focus is ultimately on the brand and the customer's experience with that brand.
Right, Megan. There is a lot of competition out there, so you need to be recognized as a brand and not only establish but retain and expand your customer base in order to survive in today's economy.
Exactly, Joe, and that's a major point there. You know, you as the retailer, you really need to leave a good impression on your customer. And in a recent survey done by Cognizant Business Consulting, they polled shoppers to understand what their expectations were across the channels, and the results showed that shoppers were looking for three things: consistency in service, consistency in product availability, and consistency in pricing. What's the main takeaway? Consistency. That's all part of the omnichannel retailing approach. You know, at the end of the day, you're one brand, and you want your customers to have a positive interaction on all levels. All right, so now that we've clarified what the term omnichannel retailing is and why it's, you know, why is it important? Again, it goes back to the brand and building that relationship with your customer. You know, retail, it's always been about the customer experience, and omnichannel by no means changes this, it simply takes it to another level. It's now an end-to-end experience that begins whenever and wherever the customer orders, and not necessarily beginning or ending in the same place. The shopper's journey, it's much different than it used to be. You know, it's no longer a linear one, and that's where things start to get complicated. You know, as retailers, we need to embrace the shopper's web-fueled, digitally powered, nonlinear lifestyle and engage the shoppers in every channel at every touch point.
Wow. Megan, what exactly do you mean by linear versus nonlinear journey, and how exactly does that propose a challenge to our retailers?
Yeah, Joe, I kind of threw a lot of phrases at you there. Web fueled, digitally powered. The main way to take away from there is the idea of this nonlinear versus linear. And that's a great question. So to put it simply, shoppers are no longer just going to one channel, say, going to a store, going to the mall, going to the store. They either go in, they buy, or they don't, whatever the case may be, and they leave. That's not how it is anymore. Today they could incorporate some or even all of the retailers' channels in their decision process. So here's a great example from my own personal experience. Over the holidays, I decided I wanted to buy my husband a pair of boots. So I'm the kind of person, I guess you can call me an informed shopper, because I like to do my research online. So I went online, I looked around, I actually came across, I think I narrowed it down to 2 pairs of boots. But certain things you kind of need to see in person, especially with shoes. I'm the kind of person I like to see, the quality, how is the sole, are they wide, are they narrow, what kind of leather is it? So I wanted to have that touch and feel. It just so happens that they happen to have one of those retail locations close to my home, so after I had narrowed it down, I went to the store. And so I go to the store, and now here I am, and I was in luck. I was able to decide on a pair of shoes, and they had a size. So here I am in the store with the box in hand, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but when I went online, they were on sale, and they were 20% off. So now here I am standing here, and this is a pretty big ticket item. When something retails for well over $100, a 20% savings, you're talking $30, $40, that's a nice chunk of savings. It's the holidays, I'm spending a lot of money, so who wouldn't want a sale? So anyway, so I quickly glance around the room, and I don't see any signage. So I turn to the girl, and I say to her, hey, I'm just wondering, these happen to be on sale online, but I don't see any signage. This still applies, right? And she turns back to me and she says, actually, it must be an online promotion that they're doing because we don't have anything going on in store that I'm aware of. So she checked with her manager, and the manager's like, no, it's an online-only promotion, da-da-da-da-da. So here I am standing here, and, I have the box in hand. Now they're not on sale. I'm like, all right, well, what do I do? So I quickly whipped out my phone. I went online, and they happened to have, the sale was still there. They were offering free shipping, and they had a size. So what did I do? I added it to the cart. I gave her the box, and I walked out of the store. Okay, now, let's review my experience real quick. So started out on my laptop, went to the store, used my phone, and then ultimately came back, and I think I used my iPad to purchase it. Whatever the case may be, it was by no means a linear one. I went from here to there, back to there, and back again. So that's where, where I'm talking about as far as linear versus nonlinear. Now, let's review where the possible challenges are involved. Well, first off, as far as she knows, she lost the sale. She personally did not get it, and whether she was going to get commission or credit for the sale, whatever, that's gone, that's out the window. However, she has no idea what I did after I left the store. She doesn't know that I went home and bought it. For all she knows, I walked out the store, went to, another store and bought another pair of boots.
I'm surprised you didn't do that.
Well, I really liked the pair of boots, so, the fact that they had them, I was like, all right, let me go home and get them.
Nothing smells as good as a fresh new pair of leather boots.
Oh,
I have to agree.
So anyway, so here I am. First off, she lost the sale. The other thing is she kind of tarnished my experience with them. Am I going to never shop there again? Whatever. I'll probably shop there again. However, she could have made my experience better. When that manager came over, she could have said, hey, you know what, I apologize, but because we have it online, I'm willing to honor it. They didn't need to publicize it to the whole world, but she could have at least accommodated me. And again, without naming names, this isn't just a small mom and pop shop. This was a major retail location. So I would have expected for her to at least do that, match the price. And she didn't. So, right there, she could have made the experience better. I mean, who knows? Maybe I would have turned around and took out my phone to post a tweet or post something on Facebook like, hey, they just helped me out and, talk about a positive experience. But instead, she created a somewhat bad experience for me. And, look, at the end of the day, it's more important that she retains me as a customer because it's much harder to gain new ones than to retain existing. So she kind of messed up in that respect. And, I'll tell you one other thing. Until these people learn how to master the omnichannel retailing strategy, you'll be sure that I'll definitely be checking both online and in store because for all I know, they're running a promotion in one and not the other. So there's a lot of things to think about there. So this next slide I think is a really great one. It has a great chart showing some of the benefits retailers are experiencing who have succeeded in implementing an omnichannel approach. One thing I want you all to note, though, is that this is based on a 4-point scale, so those numbers are actually strong. One of the first things that you'll see, number one on that list, stronger brand identity and recognition. We keep saying that. That's the true key to your survival as the brand or the retailer. You really need to associate yourself with your customers. Higher response rates. This is where a lot of the social media interaction comes into play. I see retailers doing this all the time where they're running promotions or offering coupons, typically using social media, which really helps to, engage with the customer and drive them to that store, whether it be in-store or online. And, obviously that leads to the increased revenue and profit growth. Going down the line here, you have a few things related to customer experience. Again, at the end of the day, the importance is to not only gain but retain that customer. So you really want to enhance their experience. And then lastly, right now it's a competitive differentiator. Until everyone else gets on the bandwagon and starts applying the strategy, but for right now it's a good competitive differentiator. Okay, so now we know what it is and why it's so important, but how do you apply an omnichannel retailing strategy? So on your screen we have a few examples listed here. First and foremost, social media. If you're not doing it, you really have to get on the bandwagon. If you're really not into it or you just don't understand how to apply the strategy, there's plenty of firms out there that can help you with it, online forums. But whatever the case may be, I definitely suggest starting to use it. It's a great way to network and really get the name out there. Integrating customer reviews. So for those of you who are selling online, this is a really simple way to add value to your products on your site. Some shoppers find it challenging to shop online and rather see the item in person. But what if there's not a store nearby? You're not going to sell that person? Well, no. That's the beauty of the web, is that you do extend your reach. So, you got to also think, too, as the person on the website, they all know that this is the retailer's marketing pitch, if you will, to sell their product. So you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. But if there are customer reviews, and, I don't know about you, Joe, but I personally like to use these reviews. It's a really good testament to the quality of the product, and it's, someone else getting that opportunity to get that touchy-feely part and, relay their experiences. So I think that's a really good, unbiased way to really help promote your products. So what else do we have here? Merging social and local. Again, we're talking about the social networking and how it's important to be out there. For those of you who are familiar with, say, Foursquare or Facebook, they allow customers to now check in, if you will, when they go places. That's another way to get your name out. When I'm checking in, every single one of my friends is seeing that I was there. So maybe they'll think, oh, hey, maybe I'll check that out, or maybe I'll follow that with a post on the great thing that I just bought with a little comment or whatever. I'm giving them free advertising right there.
That's a great point, Megan. Actually, that will also help with your search engine optimization because it will create external links. I mean, my mom is infamous for this. She'll go on to Pinterest, and then she'll share a pin on Facebook, so all of her Pinterest followers happen to see it on Facebook, and now she has all of those people that are looking at it. So if it's a particular item that she might have just purchased, she'll look at the review or maybe have written a review. Her friends see it. Maybe they want to purchase that particular item. And the retail store it's, like you said, free advertising. It's so simple to use your customer's experience online, especially nowadays with all these social networking aspects.
Yeah, it's a great way to really expand your reach as the retailer, and it's because you're getting that personal effect and that person's commenting. It holds a lot more value than you just putting a straight post on your website or your own marketing efforts. Consistent pricing. Well, I obviously just shared an example with that. We all know why that's important. But that's definitely something that really should be in every channel that you're working in. The other one, cross-channel services. So this is where an order management system comes into play to ensure that not only do you have accurate inventory levels across channels, but that you can access them for use in another channel. But we're going to cover that in some more detail in our next session when we discuss how using an order management system can make achieving and analyzing your omnichannel retailing strategy easier. But for right now, two of the takeaways there are, like I mentioned before, some of the ways for cross-channel services, buying online, picking up in store, or, buying in the store and initiating a return online. Whatever the case may be, you're trying to enhance and ease the customer's experience with you and utilize the fact that you have these other channels and let them interact and work together to your advantage. Okay, so now that we know what omnichannel retailing is, and we've given you some examples, I'm just kind of curious to know, how many of you feel like you're applying an omnichannel retail strategy today? So you should see another poll pop up in just a minute on your screen asking you, do you feel like you're getting involved with this omnichannel retailing strategy today? Yes, no, plan to, have no plans to? Go ahead and share your thoughts. And just remember, after you submit, please don't X out because you will leave the session. Just hang on a second and we'll remove it for you. Okay, thanks for your feedback there. Okay, so how are your customers experiencing your brand today? Do you know? Or are you just assuming the good or the bad based upon sales dollars? Based on our first poll results, when I asked about whether you're selling in multi-channel sales channels or not, my assumption was correct. Most of you are selling in a multi-channel sales environment, but what kind of visibility do you have into those channels? For example, do you know how well each sales channel is performing against one another? This is where an order management system is also helpful. We all know this, that information is power, and having the tools and visibility to understand your sales channels is key to successfully applying an omnichannel retailing approach to your business. Look at it this way, just like your customers, they have a 360-degree view of your brand and your products. You as a retailer need to have that 360-degree view of your customer. How are they shopping? What are they shopping for? And where are they shopping? And are they on social media? Questions like that. You want to be able to have those answers. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe now, and he's going to talk about how you can analyze your sales channels to gain a better understanding of how your customers are shopping, and then how to use this insight to plan and or measure the effectiveness of your omnichannel retail strategy.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Megan. So you briefly mentioned how using an OMS, an order management system, can help you achieve and analyze your omnichannel retail strategy. And one of the ways is by producing reports like the one shown, which dictate sales by sales channel. So whether you have an order management system in place or not, if you can produce a report like this, you can establish a baseline as to how each of your sales channels are performing. Now, this is a good starting point to know where you should invest your efforts in advertising dollars. A lot of times you see store owners, for example, adding an additional sales channel, say a website, eBay, Amazon, but the sales channels are treated as separate entities. So it's hard to get a big picture view of how the storefront is performing versus the website. Now, if you were managing all of your data in one system, as it pertains to sales, inventory, customers, etc., you can generate reports like this one here to get that big picture. The other thing you can do is create a roll-up report that shows you not only the sales per channel, but also by year. Or you can show the year-by-year sales in one channel, like in the example on the screen, and utilize this to measure the difference of the effectiveness of your omni-channel strategy per channel. Now, looking at this report, one might assume that you put more advertising dollars or did something different to improve the customer's web experience, which caused a significant jump in sales from one year to the next.
Yeah, actually, Joe, the data that's on the screen right now for this sample is actually from one of our customers who put effort into enhancing the customer's online experience. In essence, they were applying an omni-channel retailing approach, and they saw some really dramatic results from this. And there's actually a really interesting story behind it. So this customer, they started out selling through catalogs and TV infomercials. But as times changed, they realized that A, they weren't getting enough reach to the catalogs, and B, TV was just getting way too expensive. So in order to stay up with the times, they decided to reinvent themselves, and they turned themselves into a web-based business, actually selling through multiple websites. In the chart on the screen, you can see how sales dramatically increased from 2012 to 2013, but what you can't see is what happened and what did they do to achieve such a dramatic increase. So the story behind it is actually, they saw that their sites weren't performing very well. And they also saw that from other reporting that there was a tremendous amount of customer service calls that were coming in, particularly related to the how-to type of questions. So how did they respond? Well, they realized that the experience customers were receiving on the website couldn't compare to that they could receive in the store. Again, I told you my own personal experience. I personally like certain things it's hard to really tell from online, whether it's a good product or not, and you really need that touch and feel kind of aspect. So this is kind of the experience that they were having, but how did they overcome that? The answer, it was product videos. They literally created a video for each and every product on the site. And it wasn't anything fancy. You know those, like those flip cameras? I actually have one of those personal handheld ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they used. They made these little product videos for each and every product. Again, nothing fancy, but it did the job. And by doing these videos, the customers got a chance to get that touch and feel that they were lacking by seeing someone else interact with the product. The result? Sales skyrocketed. And there was not only that, there was also a drastic reduction in the number of customer service calls. So it was a real win situation.
Excellent. Thanks, Megan. So that's a great example of how tracking and understanding the performance of your sales channels can help you in successfully applying an omnichannel retail strategy. However, as I mentioned earlier, it's essential not only to track sales in each channel, but inventory and customer data as well. The latter comes into play when you try to apply some of the cross-channel strategies we mentioned earlier. You need to have access to, say, for example, inventory levels across all channels. So if you have a physical retail store and it isn't performing as well as your website, and you're at risk of running out of stock online while you have an excess in the store,
Collecting dust.
Wouldn't you want to have access to that inventory for potential online sales? I mean, I certainly would. You don't want to miss a sale online because you have stock sitting in the stockroom of some storefront that you may not sell for months. Now, these are some of the areas that need to be considered to successfully apply an omni-channel strategy. And all of this can be managed with an order management system. And if you join us next time when we explore the benefits of using an order management system, which will include a live demo of our own product, MOM, Multichannel Order Manager, you can see it in action.
Okay, so that pretty much wraps up our presentation for today. I hope you all found it informative and that we did, in fact, answer the questions we set out to cover. What is omnichannel retailing? Why is it important? How to apply it? And then ultimately how to measure and evaluate the success to better understand your strategy. Now, I'm just taking a second to go through these questions that came in. It looks like most of them we've answered through the presentation. There are a few of you who asked some solution-specific questions, which I'm going to actually pass over to Joe, and he'll get back to you after the session. But I think that we've pretty much covered all your questions at this point. So unless we have any last-minute ones coming in, I'd like to, thank you again on behalf of Joe and myself for joining us. And I hope to have you all join us for the next segment in the series when we take that deeper dive into the tools available to help you better manage and gain the visibility into your multi-channel sales environment.